Real quick, I have another one for you, an introduction of this book here, Handbook to Higher Consciousness by Ken Keyes Jr. Alright, I'm going to read the foreword. The book has a little dedication or a little seal of approval from Wayne Dyer. But I like this little foreword here. Let's get into it. To start, some of the table of contents, the chapters here, we have Secrets of Happiness, the 12 Pathways, Being Here Now, the 7 Centers of Consciousness. It breaks it down to the 3 centers of unhappiness, the 2 joyous centers, the fulfilling centers, methods of working on yourself, consciousness focusing, techniques of consciousness focusing, the instant consciousness doubler, all kinds of stuff. The illusion of self, how to increase your enjoyment of sex, living love with children, the optimal use of your biocomputer. I'm getting tongue-tied. There's just a lot of stuff here. It was funny, I was reading some reviews on this book. I was actually just looking for an online version to make sure that I'm not violating anyone's rights. And then I found it, but at first I found some reviews, and people are so funny. They're full of themselves. So they were giving these really in-depth reviews. I don't think that I learned anything new from this book. It was basically just, it's just like, shut up. Who cares? Nobody is saying that they are the original author of a thought these days. When you're giving this information, these kinds of things, self-development, consciousness, philosophy, these things are based on common truth and principles, period. These are just a more evolved way of carrying yourselves, a more practiced and diligent form of thought, a way to constantly surround your psyche with things that enrich it. So it's like a healthy diet for the mind. And so if you're reading information and it's clicked because you've referenced it before, it's not that it's useless. It's beneficial food for your mind. It's beneficial food for your psyche. And as you raise your consciousness, you recognize the intent and the purpose of studying those kinds of things. That which puts you on a higher realm of thought to receive information. And each time you read something, you're going to take in something different, and you're going to be at a different vantage point, a different version of yourself each time you approach a subject or a material. Anyway, so it's not... and then there was the other ones that said, oh, this was so impactful, it changed my life, it was so great, da-da-da-da. But then the ones that were sprinkled through that were giving their, their thesis on why it's nothing new was just kind of funny to me. So, don't expect it to be mind-blowing, earth-shattering, something that you haven't heard before. If you approach something with the intent that you need to be impressed, that's already coming from a space of ego or a space of separation. You want to categorize something as less than, higher than, better than, worth my time, not worth my time. Who are you? Break yourself down. Break down the ego. I have not learned all that I can learn at this stage. There's always going to be more to learn. I can always benefit from another perspective, as long as it's from the higher planes. Go on with that mindset. So here's the foreword. Millions of years ago, when our animal ancestors had to survive in the jungle, it was necessary to have an instantly effective fight-or-flight mechanism. When a tiger was about to spring, an automatic emotional response was a lifesaver. A nervous shock was needed to squirt adrenaline into the blood so that muscles became jet-powered. Emotional arms were needed to command full attention. When a tiger was ready to jump, there was no time to admire the beautiful sunset. As a jungle survival mechanism, our animal ancestors were programmed for automatic duality, automatic feelings of otherness, threat, and paranoia. Survival required instant domination of consciousness to meet the perils of the jungle. right away, right there, that kind of coincides with how I was saying people were approaching reviews, book reviews. It's that automatic emotional response, that domination of consciousness. I have to show you that my way of thinking is better than your way of thinking, rather than looking for the fruit, you know, rather for looking for that beautiful sunset within the words, like you're saying. That was a different time. We gotta let that go. We gotta let that mindset go, that approach to doing things go. We are the pioneers in an evolution of human consciousness. It was only about 10,000 years ago that our ancestors built the first cities. As civilization grew, survival no longer depended on the instant fight or flight of the jungle. Survival and happiness now depend on tuning in to the overall situation involving ourselves, the people around us, and the total environment of the here and now. Perceptiveness, wisdom, and oneness are now the ingredients of effective and happy living. Absolutely. But our biocomputers are still programmed for jungle fight or flight, for a fast release of adrenaline into the bloodstream, and for a rapid heartbeat, for automatic anger and fear. In our social interactions, our consciousness magnifies molehills and makes them into mountains, and this constant distortion destroys our energy, our insight, and our ability to love. Absolutely. When you come at something with the intent to compare it, you're not coming at it with a space of love. You're coming at it with a space of duality. How can I be different than you? How can I be better than you? How are you better than me? How do I feel that you think you're better than me? And let me go ahead and set up a judgment. You gotta love people like that too, who are rude to you because they expect that you are the type that would misjudge them. I've had that so many times with people assume how I'm going to be towards them. Like, I don't even know you. Everyone starts with a clean slate. I mean, what you show yourself will interact in that moment. But I'm totally by the day, usually. If it's like, if you're an asshole to me, I will continue to reflect that back to you until you've gotten that lesson. Because that's what we're here to do. We're mirrors of each other. We reflect each other. So if you approach everybody with a chip on your shoulder, that's just until you get the fact that you're a person with a chip on your own shoulder. Hello, get the lesson. You can be that mirror for people, or you can set that tone and the energy by actually, the better way to do it is to be love, which is probably what Kin Key's whole message is. So don't do what I do. I sacrifice a lot of relationships by being a little too real with people. Hey. But when they value authenticity, they come back. Anyways, thus, survival in the jungle meant that we had to be programmed for instant paranoia, instant fear, instant anger, instant perception of duality. Survival in our world today, means that we must have instant perceptions of oneness, of love, of compassion with everyone, and understanding of everything around us. When we learn to cut through our paranoid jungle programming, we are on our way to higher consciousness and happiness. Evolution is now working to remedy this primitive jungle alarm wiring in our brain that tends to hold us on lower consciousness levels. Understand that you are being held on a lower consciousness level, and those around you, which it talks about, what we need to see and recognize is the overall situations involving ourselves, the people around us, and the total environment that we're in. Sometimes we ourselves, oftentimes the people around us, and many more times the environment that we allow ourselves to stay in, are all working simultaneously, triple threat, to keep you on a lower consciousness level. Because it's the game, it's the point. So not only do you have yourself, your own inner crap that you're telling yourself, you have other people that'll reinforce crap, the wrong ways of thinking, the wrong ways of handling situations, and then you have your environment until you raise out of it, until that mirror can shift and reflect something different. Because as long as you are dishing it out, not only will the people around you be keeping you at that lower level, and your environment will reflect that as well. Once you start to see the patterns, it makes total sense. As you elevate in your consciousness, the things around you shift, the people around you shift, you interact differently, they reflect back differently. As you reflect this different, that environment no longer serves. You elevate yourself and you surround yourself with different people, places, and things. Higher consciousness. As within, so without. As above, so below. I lost my place. I'm talking too much. Feeling good today. Today's a good day. 2020 is a good year, I gotta say. Alright. When we learn to cut through our paranoid jungle programming, we are on our way to higher consciousness and happiness. Forgive me if, this is where I left off, but I'll repeat this sentence again. Evolution is now working to remedy this primitive jungle alarm wiring in our brain that tends to hold us on lower consciousness levels. Paranoid, dualistic individuals who cannot love themselves and others tend to get heart trouble, ulcers, other psychosomatic diseases, are accident prone, etc. Perhaps physical manifestations of a mental programming problem, a spiritual problem. As within, so without, the manifestation of negative experiences in your life, physical trauma, all of this stuff. Perhaps 100,000 years through the ruthless survival of the fittest, humans may have nervous systems that are automatically structured to produce instant insights that facilitate love and oneness. But that doesn't help you and me. We need the living love way to show us how to live in higher consciousness as soon as possible, to override our jungle programming, so that we can enjoy living here and now. We have escaped from the domination of instincts, inflexible, unlearned behavior that guides animals through their daily life situations. Since the young human is not provided with a full repertoire of automatic, fixed responses, we are unable to independently cope. We are unable to independently cope with life for a number of years after birth. This long period of plasticity and openness to learning complex life guidance patterns helps us avoid fixed, pre-programmed behavior. If that was tough, here's an example. For example, this long nurturing period lets us learn complex language systems, and our flexibility as such is such that we can learn to communicate in Swahili as easily as in English or any other language. It's talking about the first years of birth, when the mind is most plastic and open. It's not rigid and fixed and programmed yet, that it's so limber and open to take on and assimilate to all these different things that you can learn Swahili just as quickly as you can learn English. It's the best time for children to become bilingual, trilingual, whatnot, because you can absorb that information. You haven't set up these rigid programs and blocks towards it. I don't understand that word. It doesn't sound like what I'm used to. When really, the process of speaking and linguistics is all the same. It's just a phonetic sound. You hear it, you repeat it, you associate it. Now you speak the language. But as we get older, we get more fixed. I speak English, therefore I'm less plastic and flexible to learning certain languages. Some people are fluid with it, and some people have a struggle with it because of this. Instead of a complete pattern of animal-type instincts to provide survival responses to life situations, the young child uses ego mechanisms backed by hair-trigger emotions to develop security, sensation, and power magnification of the moment-to-moment sensory inputs. Our personal development into fulfilling, happy lives, as well as the progression of civilization beyond the dangerous power consciousness, depends on our getting free of our ego-backed subject-object, me-them, security sensation, power hang-ups. It may be helpful to see this progression of consciousness in outline form as follows. It has 3 organisms on the left and the definitions of the methods of protecting and enhancing the organism, starting with the animal. Relatively fixed lifestyle based on instinct or unlearned, pre-programmed behavior. Then the lower consciousness human is ego-directed, subject-object, emotion-backed security, sensation, and power consciousness, increasingly involving the rational mind that makes us inflexibly guard and protect habitual folkways and personal patterns. We inflexibly guard and protect our habits and our personal patterns, even when they're wrong. Someone will make themselves completely miserable in a lower consciousness vibration. Everything in their life is in shambles. Relationships fall apart constantly. Things they manifest fall apart just as quickly as they have them. They bounce around from unhappy situation to unhappy situation, like it says. They manifest diseases, sicknesses. They just seem to be magnets for bad stuff, and yet they still cling to and guard and protect their perspective. Those people will debate with you so hard that they're right, and all you can do is say, until you're ready, you're right. Everything that you're saying is right. If you believe that you can't, you're right. If you believe that you can, you're also right. So, I mean, pick your poison. What would you prefer? Now, the higher consciousness human is the ego-driven negative emotions have been replaced by wide-ranging insight and deep intuitive understanding, giving full flexibility to flow in mutually supportive and loving ways with no inflexible folkways and personal patterns. That's like, oh, you can imagine what that's like. You're just not stuck. You're not stuck to anything because you humbled yourself. You emptied yourself out of all of the baggage and the crap that has been conditioned in you systematically. So if I said, there's some people that will never leave the area where they're born or where they're raised. Haven't even been to San Diego if they live in Los Angeles. There's some people that just don't branch out that far. So someone on a larger scale, they say, I would never move to another place. I only know California. I love California. I've lived here my whole life. Certainly you can love a place, but that shouldn't deter you from exploring another place. How could you know you don't love another place? You've never been. You've never allowed yourself to do that. You're inflexible to everything that is potentially going to further your growth. And that's lower consciousness. Lower consciousness. The biocomputer with which you are equipped is the most remarkable instrument in the universe. Speaking of the brain. Your only problem is to learn to use it properly.